You know, each year about 1 million children will experience the divorce of their parents.
The sad statistic is that about 50% of first marriages end in divorce after about 11 years.
Our legal affairs contributor joins us now. He's here to talk about how you can protect your children's inheritance from divorce. Craig Wisdom, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, how do we do this? How do we go about protecting ourselves once the bad news comes that we're going to split up?
Well, what we're really aiming at is more what you're planning for with your children in the event that they ever experience a divorce.
Okay.
And it's more a question of planning long in advance. But it's just, when you set up your will or your revocable trust, wherever you lay out your estate plan about who gets what when you die, the issue is that if your children are married and you leave them money, it's their separate property, but most husbands and wives pretty soon mix that all up, and if things don't work out a few years after they inherit their property, they could end up losing a lot of that in a divorce.
50% of it?
Roughly speaking, yeah, if it really gets all mixed up in its community property. So what a lot of parents love the idea about is to say, hey, if you're leaving a significant share of assets to your kids where it's enough money to worry about that they might have it for a while, rather than just giving your kids the money outright, even when they're old enough and responsible enough, you set up what we call a generation skipping trust or a lifetime trust for the child. It's just part of your will or it's part of your revocable trust, and rather than saying, I leave my money to, half to John and half to Jane, you say, I leave half my money to John in trust for him as follows, and half my money to Jane in trust for her as follows. And basically the kid can even be their own trustee, which means they're in charge of the money and they can use it on themselves and spend it and such, but if they get divorced later on, if things don't work out, it's going to be protected. It's going to be kept clearly separate. It's also protected from their creditors if they've got a risky profession or they've got, business enterprises where they might be worried about being sued. And also, if you're dealing with a wealthy family, it's not subject to estate tax again at the next generation.
Is this something new? I mean, has this always been around?
It's always been around. The basic idea has normally been one used by rich families because the primary purpose was preservation from estate taxes. But a lot of people, as families change and as that divorce rate creeps up, and occasionally, people don't know always who their kid's going to marry. Their children might be single. Occasionally, they might not like the person they have married and they're concerned about it. And so it's becoming a much more issue even when people don't have enough money to worry about taxes. Arizona law, though, is changing as of the 1st of this coming year to make it even better protected from spouses and from creditors.
It is our society today that we've got to word things so legally, and the people that don't have a lot of money to hire a lawyer or an accountant to do this stuff for them, they're really left out in the dark, aren't they? Yeah,
and of course, most of the time, as I said, it's got to be enough money where you're going to worry about whether those kids get a divorce later on or not.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, I have a quick question to ask you. We've got about 30 seconds left, and Ralph, a loyal viewer, asked me to ask you this. What kind of and what determines a fee for settling a will?
Well, if we're talking about settling a will after someone dies, normally what we're talking about is the probate procedure. And that is, at least if you've got more than a minimal amount, which is $50,000, you normally, if you go through attorney, have to pay them an hourly rate to do the work with a court. It's normally not based on the assets, it's based on how much time is involved and whether there's any fights or anything like that. Normally, at least it's a couple $1,000s for a simple one, and if there's people fighting about it or it's more complicated, it goes up from there.
More hours involved.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Ralph, thank you for watching and for writing.
Yeah, absolutely, for your money.